Helpful for life.
Pasta. One of the most popular carb sources out there. I mean, who doesn't like at least some kind of pasta? Now, there are entire courses out there on pasta, so this is just one video. We're gonna keep it pretty high level for now. But we will give you some tips on how to choose your pasta and how to cook it. So first, let's talk about fresh pasta versus dried pasta. Now, in case you didn't know, that pasta that you buy in the box off the shelf at the store is dried pasta. This type of pasta is usually made from just two ingredients: semolina flour, which is made from durum wheat, and water. That's it, flour and water. Fun fact for you, couscous is also made from semolina flour, which is why it kind of tastes a little similar to pasta. One of the great things about dried pasta is that it's dirt cheap and it lasts pretty much forever. Now, when you're comparing it to fresh pasta, dried pasta is a little bit more firm, but that makes it great to hold up against hearty sauces like a meat sauce. Now, for portions, 1 pound will serve about 4 people. Now, since it's dried, when it cooks, it actually absorbs some of that water and swells, so you don't need as much by weight as you do with fresh pasta. But what about fresh pasta? Well, fresh pasta is also a stupid simple recipe. 2 more ingredients. All it is eggs and flour. Now, typically it's made with something called 00 flour, which is a finer flour which allows it to be even more silky, but you can just make it with all-purpose flour. And I actually encourage you to try making fresh pasta. It's very easy to make and it makes a great date night or a dinner party. Of course, you can just buy fresh pasta at the store if you don't want to make it. No big deal. Now, in case you didn't guess, fresh pasta is going to be a little more expensive than dried pasta, and you need to use it within a few days or freeze it or dry it. Fresh pasta has a smooth, silky texture and has a little bit of an eggy taste. It goes really well with delicate sauces that let that silky, tasty noodle shine. Dairy-based sauces are a great example of this. And as far as serving size go, for 4 people, you're gonna want about 1.5 pounds. Lastly, fresh pasta cooks a lot faster than dried pasta, about half the time. So your fresh pasta really only takes a couple of minutes to cook. So if you're doing fresh pasta for the first time, make sure you don't overcook it just out of habit. Well, that's enough about dried versus fresh. How do you cook pasta? Of course, anytime you buy pasta, follow the instructions on the packaging to get the best results. However, here are some tips to make it mo better in general. The first and probably most important tip is to salt your pasta water. The reason you do that is for flavor. As the pasta cooks, it absorbs some of that water, and if it's salty water, it'll absorb some of that salt. And that will flavor throughout the whole inside of the noodle, versus just on the outside, which is what would happen if you just shook some salt on afterwards. Of course, if you're cooking fresh pasta, you could instead opt to salt the dough, but personally, I think I'd rather just have my situation be the same amount of salt in the water every time, but you do you. One myth you might have heard is you add the salt to change the boiling temperature of the water. And that's not exactly true. So yes, as the salt goes in the water, the boiling temperature will change, but it's only by about 1 degree Fahrenheit out of 212 degrees Fahrenheit for boiling. So it's really not that big of a difference. You add the salt for the flavor. So now you know that you need to add salt for the flavor, but how much salt do you add? Well, one phrase that is all over the world and all over the media is make it as salty as the sea. Now, this isn't exactly true. If you did that, it may be a little too salty, but I think that phrase is counting on the fact that most people tend to undersalt their pasta water. So how much you need to add is more about 2 tablespoons or so for every 4 quarts of water. And that's going to vary, of course, based on the type of salt you use, but it's a good rough rule of thumb. Now, if you're like us and you're pretty low key and you don't care that much, don't want to be that precise, just give it a couple of good pinches as you're making your pasta water. If you prefer to be more precise, however, a good ratio is 1% salt to water by weight. And that comes out to 10 grams per liter. Now, if you want to nerd out and read about a saltiness experiment, go to the link on your screen and you can see how they came to that optimum number. Now, of course, you can taste the water as you're making that salty water to try and get it to the right level, or you can just eat your pasta Later on, notice how salty it was and either add more or less next time. It's up to you. It doesn't need to be exact in my opinion. Well, when do you add that salt? It's actually really not that important when you add it. Just add it before you add the pasta. It can be before it boils, be after it boils, not that important. For us, typically, we'll bring the water up to boil, then we'll dump the salt in, give it a little stir, dump in the pasta, give it a little stir, then you're good to go. Bada bing, bada boom. You know what I mean? Another myth that we want to help bust is wondering if you should add oil to your pasta water to help it not stick. And the answer to that is no. In case you didn't know, oil and water don't like each other. So what will happen is that oil will just sit on the top of that pasta water, doing nothing for all of the pasta underneath it. The trick to keeping your pasta from sticking while it's cooking is to stir it during that first minute or so while it's cooking. During that first minute, the pasta will be releasing some of its starches, which could cause it to kind of clump and stick together if you don't stir it. All right, Reed, I got it. The water is salted but not oiled, and it's all cooked and I've drained it now. Do I rinse it? The short answer is no. Do not rinse it. You don't want to wash off that delicious, yummy starchiness on the outside because that is what will help your sauce stick to the pasta noodle. It's also actually a good idea to save some of that pasta water. So when you're pouring off the pasta water, just stick a cup or a bowl underneath to reserve some of that. That starchy water can be really good to help you make some sauces. Now, there are 2 times where you may want to rinse your pasta under cold water. And the first one is if you want to stop the cooking because you're going to be using it in, say, a pasta salad or something like that. And the other one is if you're going to be using it in a stir fry. When you put the noodles in a stir fry, there's a lot of other stuff going on that can cause it to kind of clump up, so rinsing it off to get rid of some of that starch is not a bad thing. Lastly, what do I do if my pasta's all stuck together in the colander after I've drained it? Well, don't rinse it with water, like we just said, and don't add oil to it. If you add oil to it, then your sauce may have a harder time sticking to the noodle. The secret is that magic pasta water that I told you to save. Just pour some of that magic pasta water onto your pasta and stir it around. Not only will it cause the noodles to loosen up and not stick to each other, but it'll also warm it up a little bit. That being said, the ideal thing to do with pasta is to sauce it right after you cook it. That will give you the best results. So, hopefully you learned or confirmed at least a couple of things about pasta today. But just for fun, I'm going to give you one extra little fun fact. You can actually cook pasta without even boiling water, and you can use a lot less water than you think you need. If you're interested in that, go to the link to see the experiments they ran and the various ways that they cooked the pasta. But that's enough about pasta for today. So, forget about it.